Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today I'm bringing you my 2020 presidential election prediction for the first week of August, so between September 30th, 2020 and October 6th, 2020. So yeah, a little bit of September, but only one day. I'm also still recovering from allergies, or you can't really recover from allergies, they're either there or not, so forgive any sniffling or minor throat clearing that might happen. So, we're a month out from Election Day. At this point, the polls are pretty solid, and I'm going to give you a fair warning. There is a solid chance that polls are going to end up being a lot closer during this month than they will actually be on Election Day. I will still be treating the polls as relevant as usual, but typically the September polling is actually a little bit more accurate to Election Day, and there are multiple theories behind this, but the main one is people become more interested in the lead up to the election, but then don't always go out and vote. Seems to be, well, at least it's the theory I go with, and seems to be a relatively popular one. What I've done is I've already filled in the safe seats just to save us a little bit of extra time. I'm also going to make a note that if a seat is a flip, I will mark it as likely, not safe, because incumbency bias will always risk throwing a seat into contention, even when it shouldn't be. Now, there are a few seats that are likely that could be considered safe, but I didn't put them on here for algorithmic and also so I can talk about them purposes. Yeah, that sentence made sense. Now, there are 3 seats which are solid for Joe Biden. They are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And before I get anything of, well, I mean, remember 2020, the polls were wrong. Even the almighty Trafalgar Group, who has been claimed to have been able to predict elections into the far future and have some secret shy Trump whisperer, a phenomenon which has been disproven, is showing Joe Biden in the lead in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and at the very least showing Democrats in the lead in the Senate race in Michigan, which, isn't good for the Republicans in general. But also, we're seeing Joe Biden holding a strong 50% in all 3 states. 50%, mind you, which Hillary Clinton was never able to do. And a classic phrase of mine is, it doesn't matter if you win by 50.0 whatever 1%. It matters how often you win by 50.0 whatever percent. And Joe Biden wins by over 50 a lot of the time here, so these states are basically safe for him. Further disproving the fact that the Clinton destroying the blue wall thing was more of a people dislike Hillary Clinton than, oh, well, Republicans are gaining in the Rust Belt. Speaking of gaining, but not for the Republicans, I'm going to give you a hint. This map's not going to look good for Republicans, so, don't be on here getting worried, thinking, oh, well, he's going to show good news for well, there's one state, actually. I'm not going to be showing much good news for Republicans, so if you're going to leave an angry comment, just leave it now. So, Arizona. For the short term, I'm actually moving Arizona from likely, which I had last time, to leans. This is due to a new swath of polling we've seen where Joe Biden has dropped slightly. Now, keep in mind slightly, margin of error slightly, from about 49 points to about 48 points. Still in the lead in most polls, but Trump has also seen a steady gain. Arizona is a historically red state, and frankly, that means it could be a lot more contentious than people thought it was going to be a few weeks ago. I will say the Senate race is heavily in favor of the Democratic Party, but that could also result in some voters going, well, I want a blue Senate and a red presidency, so they balance each other out, though I think this phenomenon is going to be less common this year. Either way, for right now, I'm moving Arizona down from likely to leans. Let's do another leans state, but this time for the Republicans. Iowa and, by proxy, Nebraska's 2nd District, which is Omaha, which went blue for Obama, hence the nickname. Now, both of these states are currently leans Republican. On the ground in those states, you would not believe there was anyone who was voting Republican. Everyone is viciously upset, apparently, about how derecho was handled, how coronavirus is handled there. The main school system in Des Moines, Iowa, for example, is currently um, talking about not reopening after their governor told them to. And for the record, their governor is not a popular woman right now. Kim Reynolds is her name. However, Trump relatively is. It seems a lot of the rage towards Kim Reynolds has been redirected to the next nearest female Republican proxy, which is Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, who I, in my last Senate prediction, put her as tilt Democratic, meaning she's probably going to lose her seat in the Senate election 51% of the time. Omaha is in a similar way to Iowa, where theoretically Democrats should be doing well here, but you've got a lot of suburban rural base for the Republicans that doesn't seem to want to switch this time around, probably heavily motivated on certain social issues like abortion. I've spoken about this lightly, but I'll go in more depth here very briefly. The way the two parties break up right now is not along economic or even government lines. It's on social lines. You can find the distinct difference between both parties very easily on what do they believe about social issues. One party's pro-assisted suicide, one party's against it. One party's pro-abortion, one's anti. One is... or pro-choice, rather, I should clarify. Pro-choice, one's pro-life. One is pro-gay marriage, one is anti-gay marriage. The Republicans are still anti-gay marriage. But Iowa so I think the social area for Iowa is still notably more conservative, so people will be inclined to vote conservative more. And, there's one last leans area, and that's Maine's 2nd District. Joe Biden has polled well enough there. He's from the local region. For a short time, I had Maine's 2nd District as a Republican pickup, or keep, but now I think Joe Biden will hang on to it. So we have 5 remaining states, and I would like to make a clear point here. These are our toss-ups. I do not personally do toss-ups as a standalone. I do tilt because any race can be kind of decided by, leans a certain direction. So it's either slightly red or slightly blue. But if you're looking for the 5 toss-ups this election, it's these 3. These 3. I can't do math. These 5. However, Iowa and Arizona are on the cusp of being in that area. We just don't really have any proof. It's so hard. Arizona is enough blue. I don't think it's a toss-up, and Iowa is enough red. I don't think it's a toss-up. But, and very unfortunately, if you're a Republican, Texas is a toss-up, Florida is a toss-up, a good chunk of the deep south, by electoral vote, is a toss-up, and so is Ohio. And I'm going to be really clear here. Donald Trump needs to win all of these states. There is no pathway to victory for him if he loses one. Let's assume Trafalgar Group is right again, and for whatever reason, Michigan goes red. If Trump loses, I think he's already going to lose Arizona, but if he loses any of those states, it's over for him. So, Joe Biden's got a lot of wiggle room. Trump does not. So, first up, Ohio. Ohio, I am going to be bold, and I'm going to say tilt Democratic. We have not got much polling out of Ohio. But what we have has shown Joe Biden polling really well there. And also and in Pennsylvania, he's polled really well with the same groups that you can find in Ohio. The more Rust Belt, suburban type of towns, your suburbanites from Cleveland and the like. Think those areas. Don't be thinking Pennsylvania. Think Greater Cleveland, Greater Columbus, Greater Cincinnati, that type of thing. And he's polling really well with those voters. These voters also, in 2018, voted Sherrod Brown back into office by a sizable majority, meaning Ohio has so it's a question of, is Sherrod Brown a Joe Manchin character, where they'll vote for a Democrat as long as it's him? Or are they just needing the right Democratic candidates? And I believe Joe Biden is the right Democratic candidate for Ohio. Another tilt blue state is North Carolina. See what I mean about this not being good for Republicans? The main reason, right now, it's really going back and forth, and normally, Normally, I'd put North Carolina as a tilt Republican state. But due to how far ahead Democrats are in the gubernatorial election and how far ahead they're getting in the Senate election, frankly, I need to assume there's going to be enough down ballot carryover to give Joe Biden North Carolina. Now on to Georgia, which I'm going to put as tilt Republican, down from leans Republican. Joe Biden has polled well there. We just got a pretty decent poll that showed him at 50% there. One poll does not mean victory, though, and also Georgia is one of the biggest states for voter suppression. Like, out of the region known for voter suppression. So, I have to favor Republicans for right now, but Joe Biden really is starting to pick up the pace, especially with the Senate election receiving a lot more funding. So, normally we think of the president as having coattails down to Senate races. I think this might be one of the few times where the Senate races actually have coattails that go up to the presidential election. As weird as that analogy is. Now for Florida, and this is probably going to be another controversial call, especially after I made the call for Ohio, I think Florida's tilt Republican. Hear me out. Florida has notoriously polled slightly more Democratic than it's actually ended up being. And this is consistent. This isn't like, well, in 2016 or 2018. No, consistently, even through Barack Obama, Florida has ended up polling more Republican, more Democratic than it's ended up being. This is due to strong rural areas as well as communities of the elderly that are constantly growing, and they vote Republican. Even though Joe Biden's mildly ahead, and keep in mind, toss-up area, this is tilt Republican, next week it could be tilt Democratic. I don't feel comfortable leaving Florida in Joe Biden's category with him having a minor lead of about 1 to 3 points, depending on the polls now. And the last state is the great state of Tejas, where everything's bigger, including the Democrats' lead. Or gain, they're not in the lead right now, but Joe Biden is really gaining there. The fact there are so many undecided voters in the Senate election does play a part here, but frankly, not a big enough part that I'm going to factor it in, really. I just want to mention that the Senate vote is playing a factor in why I'm saying, well, there's a lot of Republicans here. On the other hand, we could have an opposite effect to Arizona, where people will vote Republican in the Senate and then blue for the presidential election. Joe Biden's been polling well, but he's been polling consistently about a point behind Trump, which, as I said before, it's not a question of how much you win by, it's how often you win. And right now, Trump is winning more, albeit barely. So, this is the final election prediction map I have for you. 251 votes for the Republicans, 323 votes for the Democrats. A solid victory for Joe Biden. In fact, he even beats Trump by more than Trump beat Clinton by. And enough of a mandate that it's hard for him to get away. Hard for anyone to really claim election fraud, especially if Joe Biden racks up a lot of early wins on the East Coast in places like Ohio and Pennsylvania. So, if you like the video, drop a like and also a comment down below. I always find your guys' opinions helpful and interesting. If you want to see more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Or if you want to hear more from me outside of YouTube, you can see me at twitter.com/onemanThinkTan1, the Roman numeral. I did not live tweet this last presidential debate because I didn't want it to affect today's prediction. However, I will be doing the vice presidential debate probably, as well as the future presidential debates, now that we have a vibe of how they're going to be. And we'll also have a barometer of how the debates will affect the general discourse. Response right now, not very much. But, like I said, we've only had a couple of hours in practice, so let's give it a full week before we start considering debate effects. And lastly, but most importantly, have a wonderful day.